Happy 420, my little stoner friends. Just kidding. I know none of you are smoking weed today. This is Congressional Dish, and this is your very relieved host, Jennifer Briney. As you guys probably figured out, this podcast is late because we were on lockdown yesterday, and it was weird and it's creepy, and it was really hard to focus on Congress when we had a psychopath running around somewhere near our neighborhood. Now, we weren't actually in the lockdown zone. Joe and I were about a mile and a half outside of it, but I didn't see a single human being anywhere. It was no one walked their dogs, no one went to work, everyone was freaked out. It was one hell of a day, I've got to tell you. But it ended. We've got the guys, so I've got to say, these government employees of ours, they were so awesome. The police and the mayor was so cool. We're really going to miss him, Mayor Menino. The governor was great. The FBI was great. Everybody was just really great through this whole thing. I don't know if the word is impressed or what the word is, but the amount of firepower that we had and all the tanks and all of that was a little interesting to learn. But you know, I've got to tell you that this city did an amazing job. The government of this city, the people of this city, I'm just so damn proud of this city. But we're getting back to normal here. So not only is the city getting back to normal, but this podcast is also now getting back to normal. So this podcast is going to be all about Congress. Now, I know there are a bunch of people turning into this show that have never really listened to it before, and so I just want to take a second to welcome you guys and give you a quick explanation of what this show is. This show is about Congress, but it focuses specifically on the House. The House is supposed to be the people's house. It's the best chance that we have of actually having a say of what goes on in our government, and I feel that we don't pay nearly enough attention to it, so I pay attention to the House. So for those of you new people, we're not going to get into the gun debate today because that went on in the Senate. And even though we didn't get background checks, and that is pathetic, it's not moving into the House. And so until we get something that comes into the House, I'm not covering the gun control thing. Also, I know there are people tuning into this show who want the details on CISPA, the cyber intelligence bill, which passed the House this week that has all the occupiers, ready to bust out their tents and change their avatars. And I will tell you about that bill on Wednesday. I want to give that bill the attention that it deserves and be able to collect all the debate clips, and I just didn't have time for that in the last 24 hours. Also, we have something else that we need to cover, and I'm not going to have time to do both. So CISPA is going to wait until Wednesday. There's not a huge emergency on CISPA because it just passed the House. The Senate, if they're going to take it up, is not going to take it up before Wednesday, so we still have plenty of time on that. But the biggest reason that I don't want to do CISPA first is that we have some catching up to do. 8 days ago, on Friday, April 12th, while I was in the middle of recording the 22nd episode, Congress and the President pulled some serious shenanigans that, quite frankly, have me way more fired up than CISPA. The simple reason is that, unlike CISPA, the bill I'm about to tell you about has a chance of becoming law. In fact, it already did. So let's get started with S716, the Gut the Stock Act.
Money, 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 all I ever hear these days. Every song that the DJ plays, talking of a similar situation. Ain't got none and got to get some. Gotta have more than I had before. Gotta have more than the man next door. Every day I gotta make some more, some more, some more. Well, give me a break, yeah. Or let me take some time out. Gotta frisk my mind out before I lose my life now. Give me a break. Yeah, let me take some time out.
Okay, so before I get into the details of the congressional shenanigans, we need to take a little trip down memory lane. Now, does anyone remember the Stock Act? Because Congress made a big deal of the Stock Act. The Stock Act was passed as a result of a CBS 60 Minutes segment that had aired in November 2011. And that segment explained how members of Congress bet on stocks using information they get behind closed doors, information not available to the public, and how they often leave their offices much richer than when they go in. Here's a clip from that 60 Minutes episode, and you can get a link to the full segment, which I highly recommend watching, from the show notes on congressionaldish.com.
There are all sorts of forms of honest grafts that congressmen engage in that allow them to become very, very wealthy. So it's not illegal, but I think it's highly unethical. I think it's highly offensive and wrong.
What do you mean honest graft?
For example, insider trading on the stock market. If you are a member of Congress, those laws are deemed not to apply.
So congressmen get a pass on insider trading?
They do. The fact is, if you sit on a health care committee and you know that Medicare, for example, is considering not reimbursing for a certain drug, that's market-moving information. And if you can trade stock off of that information and do so legally, that's a great profit-making opportunity, and that sort of behavior goes on.
Why does Congress get a pass on this?
It's really the way the rules have been defined, and the people who make the rules are the political class in Washington, and they've conveniently written them in such a way that they don't apply to themselves.
The buying and selling of stock by corporate insiders who have access to non-public information that could affect the stock price can be a criminal offense. Just ask hedge fund manager Roger Ratnam, who recently got 11 years in prison for doing it. But congressional lawmakers have no corporate responsibilities and have long been considered exempt from insider trading laws, even though they have daily access to non-public information and plenty of opportunities to trade on it.
So that segment airs on 60 Minutes, and then the people justifiably get really pissed off, and so the Stock Act was born. After going back and forth a few times in Congress, on April 4th of 2012, about a year ago, the president in a signing ceremony, this is for bills that they really want to make a big deal out of so that they can bring the press in and take pictures and all hug each other and tell each other how great they did. And so they had one of these ceremonies, and this is what the Stock Act did. It says that members of Congress and their employees are no longer exempt from insider trading laws. It does things like take away federal pensions from elected officials if they get convicted of certain finance-related felonies. Not that elected officials get prosecuted very often, but if they were, no pension for you. It prohibits Congress from getting special mortgage rates and things like early access to initial public offerings of stock. And then it also had different reporting requirements. And one of the things that the reporting requirements would do, it would not only make the president and the vice president and Congress itself report their financial dealings, but it would also make their employees, so their staffers, who also make a lot of money in this same exact way, their staffers would have to report their financial trading. And it would also create a searchable online database of those financial disclosures so that people like you and me can go and look through them and connect any dots that need to be connected, just to make sure that our representatives are acting in our best interests and not using their offices to line their own pockets to our detriment. Now, the Stock Act was always considered to be kind of fluffy because a lot of the stuff a lot of the rules placed on Congress are hard to prove and very rarely prosecuted, which is why the online database was so exciting. It would allow regular schlubs and sort of not really journalists, you don't have to be in CNN to have access to these records, and we could be able to download their records onto our laptops and make these connections and break stories. And so that's what makes what happened last week such an outrage. It turns out that the reporting requirements included in the Stock Act would have gone into effect for federal employees starting Monday, April 15th, unless there was a change to the law. So over the course of 3 days, both houses of Congress and the president worked together to turn S716 into a law. Now, these are the changes that were made. In regards to who needs to file financial information, congressional staff and most executive branch employees will now be exempt from financial reporting. The only people who will still have to comply are the president, the vice president, members of Congress, and candidates for Congress, and also officers of the executive branch that need to be confirmed by the Senate. So only the very tippy top of the ladder. But if you are the chief of staff, then you can go ahead and keep trading on the knowledge that you get from your lobbyist buddies. Now, in regards to the financial information itself, S716 says that the financial information that was supposed to be submitted on Marathon Monday doesn't have to be submitted until January 1st of next year. The Stock Act, the original Stock Act, also required that the financial information that's submitted to be posted online. It said you shall post your information online. This bill makes that optional. The Stock Act also said that no login information shall be required to go through this financial information, and that's been eliminated too. So it used to be, by law, that they couldn't password protect the financial information. Now they can. But then most importantly, remember that online searchable database that needs to be open to the public so that people like you and me can police the financial tradings of our own representatives? Remember that? Well, that online searchable database was completely eliminated by this bill. The only part of the Stock Act that had any teeth was completely eliminated by this bill. So that sucks. But what sucks even more than what they did is how they did it. So it turns out that April 15th, Marathon Monday, was the day that all of these federal employees were supposed to, by law, have turned in their financial information. And for whatever reason, they didn't want that to happen, and it was pretty urgent. So on Thursday, April 11th, Democratic Senator Harry Reid introduced and passed S716 with no debate and no recorded vote. Most senators had already left, and they passed it by something called unanimous consent. The whole process took literally 10 seconds. The House took up the bill the very next day, Friday, April 12th. Now here's how Fridays normally go down. The day starts off like every other day with morning goofball hour, which is when any congressman can get up there for either 1 or 5 minutes and say anything they want. Then at a set time, they do their legislative business, which is the part of the day where they do their debates and all their votes. Then when the voting is over, you'll see Eric Cantor and Steny Hoyer get up and discuss the next week's schedule and usually get into some kind of partisan bitch fest. Then the goofballs, usually including Louis Gohmert, return for hour-long sessions of congressional babbling, and then everyone goes home. So on a Friday, a regular watcher or participant in Congress knows that when you see Eric Cantor and Steny Hoyer, you know that the important stuff is over. You can either go about your day, go home, or settle in and watch some of the goofballery for pure entertainment purposes. But from there on out, you probably won't miss anything important. So back to April 12th. The House had already debated and voted on every single bill that was on their printed House schedule for the week. And Eric Cantor and Steny Hoyer got up there and did their thing, debating for over 20 minutes, giving other members of Congress plenty of time to pack up their stuff and go home. Then, right after Steny indicated that he was over it and wanted to bounce, Eric Cantor introduced and passed S716, which wasn't on the schedule at all. Here, listen to it yourself. It didn't take long.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to take from the Speaker's table the bill S716 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title.
Senate 716, an act to modify the requirements under the Stock Act regarding online access to certain financial disclosure statements and related forms.
Without objection, the bill is passed and a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
And that was it. I have absolutely no idea how that is allowed, how that is legal, and it is beyond my comprehension that that is how a bill is able to become a law. But that's what happened. And as a side note, I had read this in the Congressional Record, but then I went and downloaded the video, and the smirk on Eric Cantor's face, I wanted to slap him. So this prompted me to start Congressional Dish's YouTube page. So if you want to see the clip, and it's only under a minute, and see the look on his face, go to congressionaldish.com and to show notes for this, the 24th episode, and you can see the look on his face. Oh my God, you guys, infuriating. So after that happened, everyone went home for the weekend, and on Monday, President Obama signed it into law. But that particular Monday was Monday, April 15th, and a couple hours after this became law, kaboom, and our attention was drawn elsewhere. So now that the crisis is over and we're able to pay attention to this stuff again, what can we do about this? I honestly don't know. It's already law. It's already been signed. This was a bipartisan, self-serving scandal passed by Harry Reid in the Senate. He's a Democrat, and Eric Cantor in the House. He's a Republican. And I'd say the best thing that we can do is just remember that it happened and to let other people know that it happened. You know, next time you get into some liberal versus conservative, Republican versus Democrat, red versus blue conversation, just remember that there are things that these two big parties work together on. They're just not things that benefit you and me. And this is a perfect example of that.
Money, 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 all I ever hear these days. Every song that the DJ plays, talking of a similar situation. Ain't got none and got to get some. Gotta have more than I had before. Gotta have more than the man next door. Every day I gotta make some more, some more, some more. a break, yeah. Let me take some time out. Gotta frisk my mind out before I lose my life now. Give me a break, yeah. Let me take some time out.
So the big bill that passed the House this week was CISPA, the cyber intelligence bill that we're going to talk about on Wednesday. But that wasn't the only thing that the House did, and so let's just bust these out really quick. That way on Wednesday we don't have to talk about these at all, and we can go straight to CISPA. The first bill that I'd like to talk about is H.R. 882, and that one I'm just going to nickname the No Contracts for Delinquent Corporations Act, and this one passed on Marathon Monday on April 15th, and this one essentially says that if you want a government contract or grant, you have to submit a form saying that you don't have a seriously delinquent tax debt. Now, this is one of those bills that sounds like it does something cool, but there's so many different ways that you can get out of it. For example, a seriously delinquent tax debt is a debt that has a lien filed against it. But there's exceptions. If your debt is being paid back in a timely manner, then you can still get your contract. Timely manner is not very well defined. And then also a debt with a pending hearing. So let's say you have a ginormous debt, you want a government contract, just appeal it, your hearing is pending, and you can get the contract. So that's how I see a company walking through that one. There's another part of this bill that says a person or company will be suspended or disbarred from government contracts if they have the tax debt or if they lie about not having one. But this can be waived as long as Congress is told that it's been waived. Also, we all know that corporations and partnerships in particular, a corporation is not usually a sole proprietorship like I have going on here with Congressional Dish. It's not just one person. It's a collection of a lot of people. And so if you have a collection of a lot of people, you're not going to be considered one with a seriously delinquent tax debt unless the indebted partner owns 50% or more of the partnership. That also goes for corporations, but for corporations, you could also be considered delinquent in your tax if the entity in your corporation has less than 50% of the shares, but has a controlling interest in the corporation. But that still is pretty easy to get out of. Let's say you have a corporation and somebody controls 51% of it and somebody else controls 49%. That 49 could add up to a company delinquent in the billions, but because they don't have the controlling share, that corporation as a whole will not be considered one with an outstanding debt. So this bill doesn't hurt anything. So I think it has a chance. It looks really good. It's something you can put in a press release that tells the people, look, we're cracking down on tax indebted corporations, but it doesn't really do that because it's super easy to get out of. So this one might go to the Senate. If it's signed into law, I will let you know. Another bill that passed this week was H.R. 1163, which has to do with federal information security. Now, this bill passed unanimously without one single no vote, which is kind of rare. Now, where some bills deal with the collection of our information, this bill governs how the government keeps our information secret and keeps it from getting out. Now, since we know they're collecting, well, everything, all your texts, your calls, your emails, your internet searches, they're collecting a lot of information. This is the type of bill that we actually want to pass. Now, what this bill does is it orders procedures for the coordination of information security between civilian, national security, and law enforcement communities. Specifically, they want to create an automated and continuous monitoring system that checks for threats 24/7. This bill also creates a Federal Information Security Incident Center so that all of these threats will be sent to one place and have a coordinated response coming from only one location. I think that's a pretty good idea. Now, I do have one concern about the bill because there's always something, and this comes from the purposes section, and this is the section where they tell you what the goals are of the bill. Now, what they say here is they want us to acknowledge that commercially developed information security products that reflect market solutions are good options for us as they are designed, built, and operated by the private sector. Now, some of the systems that they listed here that we're going to be dealing with when it comes to information security are pretty important, and I just have concerns about turning it over to the private sector. In the same way that I have concerns about our physical security, which is being turned over to the private sector, such as Benghazi. Benghazi was an attack on our embassy, and that embassy was being guarded by a British private contractor instead of the U.S. military. In the same way that I think that our physical security is probably an inherent government function, I think our information security might fall under that category as well. I can envision a scenario in which we hire a company that gets a multi-million-dollar contract and doesn't want to lose it, and so covers up an information threat for way too long because they don't want to tell their customer, the U.S. government, that they royally screwed up. But if it was the U.S. government protecting ourselves, then we could deal with the threat as soon as it came in. So I'm not that afraid of having things stay in government hands. And this, when it comes to national security, is there anything more important than national security as an inherent government function? So that's my only thing, but there's nothing in this bill that says that it has to go into the private sector. So there's nothing particularly scary about this bill. In fact, I would kind of like to see it pass. So this one's going to go into the Senate. I'm going to say it has a pretty good chance, and I'll let you know what happens to it from here. Another bill that passed the House this week was H.R. 756. This one is also related to cybersecurity. And this bill requires a written cybersecurity research goal plan. Also continues a scholarship program for cybersecurity professional training with special consideration going to veterans. So that's kind of cool. But the reason I'm even talking about this bill is I just saw something interesting in there, which is that they want the government to develop a strategy for the use and the adoption of cloud computing services. And they want them to do it in consultation with the private sector. And the reason I find this interesting is that there is a widely circulated rumor, which the CIA won't confirm because, you know, they're the CIA. But this rumor is that the CIA is giving Amazon a $600 million contract for their cloud computing technology. Now, we don't know if that is for Amazon to develop a different cloud computing technology for the CIA, or if the CIA will be using the technology Amazon already has. We don't really know the details of it, obviously, but I just found that really interesting to see something related to that here in a bill that's making its way through Congress. Now, the bill itself as a whole, not that interesting, not anything I would be afraid of, and because of that, I think it does have a chance in the Senate. And then the last bill I want to talk about is actually one that failed, but I just want to tell you that it happened because it's icky. This was H.R. 249, which basically would require that federal workers with unpaid taxes be fired from their jobs. Now, when it comes to people in this country who don't pay their taxes, I guess the rate for the majority of us who are in the private sector is about 8% of us don't pay our taxes. In the federal workforce, that's closer to 3%. But here we go again. The Republicans are going after federal employees, and I don't know why. And so this one actually did fail. Now, the reason it failed is the Republicans did vote for it, but they were doing this under something called suspension. And when you put a bill up under suspension, it has to pass with a 2/3 majority. So they actually do need Democrats to be on board with it, and they weren't on this one. And so this bill didn't pass. But just, you know, if you don't pay your taxes, the government's going to come after you anyway. If you don't pay your taxes, you're going to be all Wesley Snipes and you're going to go to prison. So that's punishment enough. But to have these people also lose their jobs, like if I were to not pay my tax, well, I'm not a good example because no one's paying me right now. But let's say my husband decides he's just not going to pay taxes anymore. He's going to be able to keep his job until he's physically yanked out of it and he goes to jail. The private sector doesn't get involved with whether or not you pay your taxes, and so to have this unfair burden placed upon the federal workers, it's just, excuse me, it's just icky and unfair. And so that happened, but it failed. Yay!
Money, 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 all I ever hear these days. Every song that the DJ plays, talking of a similar situation. Ain't got none and got to get some. Gotta have more than I had before. Gotta have more than the man next door. Every day I gotta make some more, some more, some more. Well, give me a break, yeah. Let me take some time out. Gotta frisk my mind down before I lose my life now. Give me a break. Let me take some time out.
So that's it for today. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to go over to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm available everywhere, at least I know of. BlackBerry, Droid, you can subscribe everywhere. So please do subscribe. If you can leave a rating or review, that would be wonderful. Hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll talk to you in a few days.